Greetings all, we're back for another installment of the On The Brink series. I believe this is episode 4. And if you are just joining us, the best thing that you could possibly do is go back and listen to 1, 2, and 3. Because if you don't get the beginning of this series, you might be somewhat lost. Although you can listen to this podcast, I'm not sending you away. This is a very, very interesting topic, and I feel like we're actually just getting started. In the last episode, we were talking about nihilism, and I also touched on 2 branches of philosophy, absolutism and relativism. I didn't go into depth, but I grazed the surface because I felt it was necessary in order to get the gist of the comparisons and the parallels that I was making in the last podcast. Now, I certainly would have not taken it there if I didn't think it was relevant to the topic at hand. And with that said, I want to explore even more because it's important to understand that relativism plays a role in the gradual unraveling of a civil society. And as I always say, before I even get down and dirty, let me make sure that my lumbar pillow is in the proper position so that I can be comfortable, because this is going to be a ride. So you get comfortable, get your coffee, get your soda, get your water, get whatever you need to get that beverage, and really, really listen to what's being said here, friends, because a lot is being revealed in this series. So, I understand that there are those who will argue, what is the problem with questioning societal norms, traditions, and so forth? And people definitely do think differently today than they did 200 years ago. We don't even have to actually go back that far. Let's just go back about 30 years ago, friends, 20, 30 years ago. Our ideas about the roles of women have obviously changed. We have redefined the family. Technology has raised our standards of living and connected humanity on a global scale. All of these changes have put us in a position where we should not reevaluate our moral, ethical paradigm. I mean, after all, we can't apply the same ethics to AI as we would apply to an actual human. Did I say we should not? We probably should reevaluate our moral, ethical paradigm. And as for women and men, in the days of old, in the days of antiquity, women had a completely different set of expectations and cultural norms to fulfill. We all know that. The women of today bear no semblance to the trad wife. The trad wife was the one that stayed home. She had a bunch of kids. Her husband went out and he worked, and she cooked dinner, and it looked something like Leave It to Beaver. If you don't know what that is, please go and check out Leave It to Beaver on YouTube. I'm not going into all of that. But that's a perfect sitcom for exemplifying who the trad wife was in the traditional nuclear family. So let's talk about all of the different cultures in the world. And friends, all of this is related because there are men who live in sub-Saharan Africa who actually still hunt their food while living in huts. And then there are men who live in the Amazon and they still speak their tribal language and they practice rituals. Yes, they do. They do all kinds of things that we call third world religion and third world. But to them, it's culture and it's how they live their life, and they wouldn't have it any other way. Now, friends, there are even cultures who still practice arranged marriages, and they also intermarry. And those are not necessarily cultures in Africa. These are cultures that are of the Middle East and even Asian cultures. So how can we apply a standard or a rigid set of principles and moral laws that apply to people whose culture counters our own? And here we have it. That is the argument. That is the argument, friends, for moral relativism. What we're going to reveal is the connection moral relativism has to nihilism and how it contributes to the erosion, breakdown, and ultimately the collapse of a civilized society. And in order to truly understand how man has over the millennia constructed vast empires and erected a civilized society, we need to understand what role evolution plays in the development of mankind. I believe that evolution is largely left out of this kind of discourse, and I'm really unsure as to why. I think evolution is this word that really has been, well, it's a word that we only really hear in the science community. So nobody talks about evolution other than that. If scientists aren't talking about evolution, nobody talks about evolution. And I'm also questioning this. Could it be that people don't want to acknowledge that there are men more advanced than others? And that's what seems to be the case in the Western world with this newfound morality. And it is rather new, friends. It's this morality that basically says that everybody's on the same level. No one is better than anybody else. No one's inferior. No one's superior. And we are all the same. And that is what inclusion is all about. It's an oxymoron because they talk about diversity, but they really don't want any diversity. They want all things to be the same throughout. And therefore, you can't look at anything as being better or worse, which is really, really interesting. And we're going to keep talking about that in many ways, because that argument is going to be infused not only in this podcast, but throughout the series. Now, I can say all of this with confidence because when we look at the political spectrum today, we see that there are those who believe the society is unjust due to this factor of inequity. They have argued that there are too many people who are without adequate housing, healthcare, and educational and also job opportunities. These people, they assert now, are suffering by the hands of this invisible system called systemic racism. And it's in everything. It's everywhere. It's everywhere we look. It's behind the scenes. It's the reason why there are multitudes of people who are lagging behind culturally, economically, and socially. Now that's what the popular opinion seems to be because everywhere we look, we're hearing it. We're being inundated with that message. This is the reason for this. It is because of systemic racism. You see, I could never accept that argument. Never mind the fact that everybody around me, it seems, accepts it. I wouldn't know who didn't accept it because they can't talk about it. They can't come out with it. If you come out with it, you lose your job. If you come out with this, you lose your friends. If you come out with it, you lose family members. This is how serious this is. The fact, I haven't even fully come out. I'm serious about this. But the day that this is out, I have no problem with it. No problem whatsoever. Because in fact, it all needs to be said. Now, this is the reason why I could never accept the argument. Number one, there are people of color who somehow, despite the systemic racism claims, who were able to rise above their impoverished circumstances. They overcame their odds and have become a success in their own right. And this is not a rare phenomenon. People have done it and are still doing it. But when this is pointed out, they try to refute this fact by saying, well, those people are tokens. They are the few and far in between because they, by and large, are not like most people. Most people of color are still of the underclass and underprivileged. They're marginalized victims of oppression. This oppression that is rife within all systems in our modern day life. Let us circle back. Let's circle back to this topic of evolution because evolution is multifaceted and it is the very word, realization, that word that implies evolution. I want to be frank because it's so much easier. I want to talk about these people, the whiny babies or wine babies, who constantly complain about how unfair the world is, and they want to blame the best, the brightest, and the most accomplished for why they themselves have failed to thrive. You see, they refuse to accept that the progression from rags to riches has to do with evolution. They don't want to understand that progress comes from overcoming the vicissitudes of life. They don't believe people should have hardship. To these fools, hardship is an injustice. Every time they open their whiny mouths, they say, people should have housing, people should have job opportunities, people should have health care. All of these, they staunchly believe, are human rights. And to deny this is a moral evil. In their eyes, a moral evil. But history tells us otherwise. There is not one group of people on the face of the earth who didn't have to overcome challenges. The desire to have a life of ease is really the desire to benefit from what one does not want to work for. You see, what one wants is to eat of the fruits of the labor of others. I have a question. At what point in the history of mankind did man not begin life poor? You see, I'm not talking about people who inherited wealth. I'm talking about, how did it all begin? At one point, man was lacking in knowledge. He didn't have many material items. He certainly didn't have all the technological advancement he has today. And he was lacking spiritually. All of that is impoverishment. And how was this so? Why was this so? Why do the men of the Amazon reject modernity? Why do they still build huts in the jungle while chanting to the gods? Friends, we're in the age of AI, yet we still have people in the world who have never seen a laptop computer. You see, in the industrialized world, there are still adults and children that are illiterate. How can this be? There are religions in the East who still practice polytheism and polyamory. Women are forced to veil themselves, and even if they so as to look at a man in what they deem a lustful way, she could be stoned. Those same women are prohibited from going to school, speaking in public, or even eating in public with their male counterparts. All of this, the moralists in the West would vehemently condemn, calling it misogyny and the denial of women's and or civil rights. So here we have it all over the world. People endure barbaric practices. They live under tyranny and oppressive governments. They have no freedom to do or be anything. They are born expected to be a member of the collective, and they die that way, never knowing who they are independent of the tribe. At the beginning of this talk, I introduced the concept of moral relativism. And I didn't delve too deeply because we just don't have the time. But I think it's important for you to see that what they're arguing is that to be, I guess you could say, relative is really not relative at all. It's not. Let me unravel it, because there actually is no difference. No difference in any of these cultures other than in the appearance. It's all the same. And what is the same about it? The failure to evolve. And I'm going to get into this, and I'm going to really talk about what I mean by evolve, because I have somewhat of a different definition. In context, that is. Evolution is simply advancement, and it's measured in so many ways. There are cultural, economical, educational, spiritual, linguistic, biological, and you get the point. Evolution is the constant transformation that takes place naturally in life if there is no stagnancy or hindrance. We know that evolution is natural because we can observe it in the natural world. Nature is transformative and it does not need the interference of man to evolve. Although man, in his arrogance, thinks that nature needs his help. And I've talked about this so many times before. Friends, there is a reason why there are some plants and animals on the endangered species list. And that reason has to do with their failure to adapt to various changes in their environment. And so this brings us to another point. Evolution is about advancement and adaptation. Those who cannot adapt to the ever-changing world struggle in life. And we see this at present. We are in the age of AI and people will be losing their jobs. It is what it is. Many people are trying to hold on for dear life, but they know it's only a matter of time. So what do? They start complaining and whining to the government because they think it's unfair. Friends, they think it's unfair to evolve. They want to remain stagnant. You see, the unfair argument is the same argument uttered by the moralists who believe that all people, particularly those of color, should have equal opportunities. They say if not for racial discrimination, they would be much better off. I could really take the two things that I just said. I could take you to another place just on that alone. I don't want to deviate. I don't want to go off on a tangent. There is so much there because it's so loaded. If not for racial discrimination, they would be much better off. How they see the world, friends. They see the world as their enemy. That all is against them. That all is evil. And there is no goodness. That's why they have to create it. Through these so-called laws, they have to make people do good. And what do I say about that? I say that nobody can change the human heart. Yes, as Martin Luther King said, we can't do that. We can't change the human heart, but we can create laws to curtail human behavior. Absolutely. But in order for man to evolve, the heart must be changed. That is what it means to evolve. He works on his character. He works on his inner self. The evolution of man, the transformation of man is of his character. Moral character. And we are so far away from that. We don't even talk about that. Instead, we talk about the outside. We talk about what tribes people are from. We talk about whether they're LGBTQ, whether they're black, whether they're white, whether they're Asian. That's what we focus on. That's what's called identity these days. Not your moral character. It's what you look like. It's what you claim. It's where you live. It is how much money you have. All of that. The superficial is what we focus on. Nobody can change the human heart. Man has to work on himself. That is a work of the self. We do play a role as members of society, absolutely. And that's another podcast. But we're talking about moral degradation. And in order to understand moral degradation, we have to understand that it is rooted in man's desire not to evolve. You see, it's a process to evolve. And that process comes with the relinquishment of fear and self-doubt. Most of, if not all of mankind's dilemmas stem from immaturity. What man is here to learn, what he's here on earth to learn, is that he is accountable for himself and only himself. This does not mean if you're a parent, you're not responsible for your children. You are to a certain extent, but you are raising them to learn how to be self-accountable. Not dependent, independent, and accountable. We are not in the business of trying to control what other people think and what other people do. And most importantly, we're not in the business of trying to impose our will onto somebody else. That's why I can't stand moralists, because that's what they're in the business of doing. They want to tell you how you should live and what you should do, which impedes on your ability to learn and grow naturally on your own. We all do this. This is part of the human experience if we have the freedom to live. If we have the freedom to live. If people would just mind their own business and tend to their own affairs, there really would be less confusion and less strife in the world. But instead, what we see is man making excuses for his unwillingness to adapt to change. He arrogantly thinks that he shouldn't have to. Friends, there are all kinds of... The economy for many people is in shambles, especially when it comes to buying a home. The younger generations, even my generation, are up in arms because they can't see themselves purchasing a home in the near future because they just don't make enough money to do it. But they seem to not want to adapt to the fact that things aren't the way that our parents and grandparents had it. They seem to feel that they should not have to, and that things should be the way they want it to be, and nothing should change. Whenever we have change, it forces us to grow. It forces us to figure out a new way of living, a new way of doing things. It keeps us alive. It keeps us on our toes. People don't want this because they don't want to do anything. They're lazy. They want somebody else to figure it out. They want you to do it. They want me to do it, but they don't think they should have to do it. At this time, there are all kinds of economic changes and political shifts throughout the Western world, the world period, actually. Places that were once thriving economically are now facing a slump. The housing markets in many places are deadlocked and costs are skyrocketing. But then you have places where the housing market, it's growing. And it's going to continue to grow. And it's not in a slump. And it's not deadlocked. But nobody talks about this because people focus so much on the negative. They focus so much on the have-nots. Oh my goodness. They never focus on the opportunity. You see, the opportunity is right before their eyes. It's in the emptiness. It's in the barrenness. It's in the undiscovered. People know that things have changed. They realize that what worked from years ago, is no longer working, but they refuse to accept these changes. They instead go to war with nature. They blame the government, the white man, the rich. They blame all of them for the changes and for their personal misfortune, because for some reason, they don't think anything is supposed to change but the climate. And they even blame that on the white man. You see, in their minds, nothing should change. Nobody should be poor. There really should be no variance at all, which is another contradiction because these same people will argue to the death for relativism and reject absolutism on the grounds that it does not consider counterculture. They want homogeneity and they want multiculturalism. Interesting. What they don't understand is that some cultures do not allow for the growth of the individual. And those are the cultures that are not evolving. And they are counterproductive to the entire purpose of life, which is to be fruitful. Now, this is a simple stance that they have turned into a cultural war. It's because they don't want to accept the fact that they're unevolved. They don't want to accept the fact that they are inferior. Yes, I said it. I said it. What are you going to do about it? The very reason why all of the cities and the states and also in Europe are collapsing is because the uncivilized are allowed to run amok. And the reason they're allowed to do so is because we can't expect them to necessarily accept our norms. We can't expect them to just abandon their culture and accept that of the West. My goodness, no. Assimilation is the devil. That's oppression. It's discrimination. It's actually the moral equivalent to slavery. That's what they believe, friends. And therein lies the essence of the dilemma. the erosion of cultural values and the moral degradation of the Western world. That's the dilemma. You see, there simply is no absolute way to do things or a way to be. Anything goes, and that is why there is no discernment of evil and good. It's all out the window. To these people, the evil is the good and the good is the evil. The Western world was once the pillar of civilization because it held the individual in high regard by protecting the rights of the individual. Civilization, or the cultivation of a civil society, is rooted in the flourishing of the individual. When the individual is stifled or inhibited from learning and growing in any way, that poses a serious threat to evolution and the advancement of the collective. That's why a highly evolved civilization must reject collectivism at all costs. Friends, we no longer need tribes, village communities, and prayers to rain gods. All of this made sense at a time, once upon a time. And that was because men couldn't live or function independent of the group. They needed the group to survive. But today we have the financial and technological means to be independent. Women are on their own. They have careers. They can make their own money. They can pay their own bills. I'm not saying we don't need each other. I'm saying we have to learn how to meet our needs collectively in a new way. And that's what adaptation is. It's about adjusting to change. Friends, that's what this all is about. But the moralists and others who oppose this message do not want to adapt because they want to return to the olden days of tribalism. Ayn Rand spoke about it. She said, return to the primitive. That's what it was all about, and it is about. They love the idea of communism because they don't have to do the work necessary to advance themselves in the world. They can receive all the benefits of a civilized society while remaining in a primitive state. Socialism and communism are collective forms of government that must be rejected in a civil society. To allow it, I mean even an inkling of it, will unravel and collapse a civilization overnight. And that's why we see so many communist states that are failed states. Because it kills the human spirit and does not allow for the advancement of the human spirit. Evolution involves the natural release of the individual from the collective into the world for the purpose of the freedom to self-discover. It's only through individual self-discovery that societal advancement is possible. That's why we have high society. That's why we have the arts and technological innovation. And now we're entering the phase of educational revolution and spiritual advancement. All of this is made possible via the liberty of the individual from the collective. I'll say it again. There can be no civilized society without the freedom of the individual from the collective establishment, and also without a set of principles, which I also call cultural values, but principles that allow for the liberty of the individual, we cannot have an evolved society. Evolution that's cultural, political, or scientific begins in the mind of the individual. That's where it all begins, in the imagination, which is something else that's not talked about. Nowadays, kids don't even know how to use it. They're like, what does that mean? What's the imagination? This is why it behooves us to revamp our educational system. And it's happening. Friends, it's happening. And that's a whole nother podcast. And I've talked about it, and I said that I've developed the framework, and I am going to release it very, very soon, because the time is now, friends. People need it. People want it. People are hungering for it. And it's just not available right now because it has yet to be released, but I have it. I have it. and it will be released very, very soon. At this time, we're also seeing a concurrent reflection, or maybe a reevaluation of our values in the West. We are beginning to see that if we do not have a society of law and order, we will no longer be a free and flourishing people. The breakdown of law and order is a direct effect of devolution. Devolution is enveloped in the moral degradation of souls. And what makes this even worse is that these souls are further devolving because they're being told that they're not responsible for their own behavior. It's the white man's fault. The white patriarchy is the problem. White men and white people are the epitome of evil, and it's because of them people of color are lagging behind. It's not your fault that there are drugs in your community. It's not your fault that your community is high in crime. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. That's all we hear. Again. How do we explain why animals and plants are failing to evolve? There are animals and plants that are, we know it, they're on the endangered species list. They are. And never mind the animals and plants. What about the failure of some whites to thrive? Why are some whites failing to evolve? We don't talk about that, do we? No, because they're all privileged. You see, there is this largely unanswered question that lies at the heart of this entire talk, and it's about nature and how we as men are one with it. If we could comprehend within ourselves our connection to nature and see nature not as something external, but our counterpart, we would then understand that just like the animal, just like the plant, we are bound to nature's laws. And these laws are revealed in science, and we know about some of them, but they're hidden in a spiritual sense. But I wonder, even if the laws were revealed, would man heed them? Would he hold the laws of nature in such esteem that they would be made the cornerstone of his internal governance? Well, friends, the question has already been answered, because that was the very thing that the United States and the European nations aimed to do. What we understand to be the laws of our land, particularly in the United States, all of our laws are rooted in our document, the Constitution. All of the laws, well, our central core values are there. And then laws, we have books and books of laws. But all laws essentially originate in moral law. And the moral law derives from nature. And nature from God, the source of all. We derive our understanding of good from our connection to nature, which really is a connection to ourselves. And of course, all that are around us. As long as man denies nature, and what I'm talking about are nature's truths, he will continue to negate his own moral compass. Therefore, denying what a woman is and creating multiple genders or no gender at all, you're nothing, you're not male, you're not female, you're neuter, is a slap in the face to nature. It's a total disregard for nature. Nature dictated that you're a man. Nature dictated that I'm a woman. You don't get to dictate that. You don't dictate that. You humble yourself. You see, this is the problem. Why is man doing this? Well, the short answer is he's arrogant. People are arrogant. How dare they? If I tell you plainly, and I'm going to, that the reason for tolerating homosexuality and other deviant behavior in the natural world, if I told you, let's go back, if I told you that we tolerate it because it's about being nice to people. We don't want people to feel left out. Would I be lying? Or better yet, what if I said those who engage in these kinds of behaviors, deviant behaviors, are filled with disdain? Why are they filled with disdain? Disdain for people like me and others who tell them that this is not right. Because they don't like the fact that we're telling them that what they're feeling, we're not validating them, is what I'm trying to say. You see, it's not that their feelings and their thoughts aren't real. They are. But they're primitive and bestial. That's the issue. And these thoughts, these behaviors, are not characteristics of the evolved man. Because this is what I know. The evolved man is spirit. And spirit does not live by feelings. This is a higher man, does not live by feelings and desire. I could go on and on about this bestial and primitive state that is prevalent in contemporary society, but that's really another podcast. It is something to think about because it does have to do with moral degradation. And I thought it was very important to talk about it because I wanted you to understand what these behaviors really are, which they're primitive and they're devolved and they come from something very old. Man before he was man in a former state. Because we evolve. Friends, there are 3 stages of manhood. Beast, man, God. That's it. And we evolve through the 3. So you needed to know what these behaviors really are and what they represent. And I think of everything that was said here. And the most important is that civilization rests not on handing out false merit, but on standing on the natural law. And that's the law that exists in the natural world. You see, you don't have to have an organized religion or even believe in a deity. All you have to do is revere nature, which means you have to hold it in high esteem and you cannot live contrary to it. Friends, we have thousands of laws on the books, yet there are still people who will intentionally break laws. If we keep allowing those people to question the integrity of our laws, deny norms, and hand out freebies to the undeserving, we will all be complicit in the destruction of civilization. Those who refuse to abide by the laws of society ought to be banished from it. We cannot expect to have a civil society alongside the uncivil. Nature destroys any and all that do not abide by it. Thanks for joining us here at the LC. We look forward to your return and also your input. Please feel free to leave a comment on our LC handle on X, YouTube, Rumble, Substack, and Medium. I look forward to it.